Good morning and welcome to this week's IGTV. I am talking about how to help your teenager create an emergency plan because you can't protect them or be with them in every moment. And as much as you are doing your best to keep them safe, they need to understand what to do in dangerous situations when you are not there. This is extremely challenging because I understand as a parent, your job is to keep your teenager safe, and your job is to provide an environment where your teen is not in really sketchy situations all the time. And the reality is they're going to be. They're going to be. And locking them up and throwing away the key and just like feeding them pizza under the door for the rest of their life might be an option. Probably not a really workable one though. So if this is something that you're interested in or you're struggling with or you know someone who is going through this, then this is the video for you. My name is Allie Payne. I am a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach, and I have been working with parents and teens to help them end the painful disconnection, emotional blowups, stressful silences, power struggles, and pissing matches for the last 15 years. And create relationships built on trust and respect. And I was a very troubled teen, so I'm putting together that experience as well as having been a parent for 21 years and helping thousands of parents through situations like this to give you the understanding and the tools. And today I'm going to talk you through the actual conversations so that you can begin to implement this in your relationship with your teenager. Before I go any further, I want to thank you. If you're watching me live here on Instagram, hit the follow. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. And I want to let you know that what I'm talking about today applies directly to a program that I have available right now for 34% savings. It's called Become a Boundaries Boss, and it is available via the link in my bio here on Instagram at Allie Payne. And it's covering all of my 4 secrets to what a boundary is, what it's not, how to hold and set respectful boundaries with actual step-by-step instructions to go through it, plus my new compassionate consequence formula, which is how to create consequences that build connection and respect rather than tank them, and create lasting behavior change instead of just more defiance and disrespect. And if you're interested in that, you can hit the link in my bio, Allie Payne, and it's Become a Boundaries Boss, and it is on 34% off until Monday at noon. If you are interested in that, you'll also find it in my Instagram stories. Okay. So let's jump in. I want to tell you the story about, this is a mama that I was working with in one of my programs. And this was a specific question that she asked relative to boundaries, consequences, just finding that line with her teenage daughter, 15-year-old teenage daughter, okay? Now, I don't care if you're watching right now, if you're a dad, if you're a mom, whatever you identify as, and if you're raising a teenage son or a teenage daughter, it doesn't matter. This is exactly what applies in how to protect your teen from bad influences, knowing that you cannot, well, again, locking them up and throwing away the key is like one option, but maybe not the only option. All right. Okay, so this mama wrote me this story, this question, and I'm going to try and lay out the details really quickly for you to give you context so we can get into what do you do about it. So mom of 15-year-old daughter, okay, the daughter's friend group, okay, one of the parents, the parent set in this daughter's friend group owned a vacant condo, like a vacant apartment, okay? So for whatever reason, it wasn't rented, not being used, but it was furnished and they owned it, okay? So parent, the mom is who I'm working with a 15-year-old daughter, the friend group of the 15-year-old daughter. There are a set of parents from that friend group that own a vacant apartment, okay? All right. So these set of parents we're allowing these 15-year-old girls to have free reign and access to this furnished, vacant apartment. So basically, imagine your child, your teenager's friend group wanting to go and hang out every weekend, because why wouldn't you, at this vacant apartment, completely unsupervised, free for all, I guess, like do whatever you want. Okay? That's the situation. What this mom had been doing is what probably most of us do, right? So I'm just looking at my notes here. I want to make sure I cover everything. Is that as a parent, that feels ridiculously freaky and scary. And so the reaction is I need to control because it's my job as a parent to keep you safe, right? Like that's what you're like, yeah, but Allie, hi, it's my job as a parent to keep my teenager safe. So therefore they are not allowed to go. That seems pretty simple, right? It's pretty simple, cut and dried. Well, maybe, unless you have a teenager. So what this mama had done was gotten into significant arguments with her daughter because let's just be in the teenage mindset for 1 second. This is this teenage daughter's friend group, not necessarily a bad friend group. Sure, there's always friends in a group that are more risk adverse and ones that love risk in every friend group. So by not allowing her daughter to go or by having constant arguments about her daughter not going, you're essentially saying to your teenager, remember being a teenager for 1 second. When your parent is saying to you, you can't go with these, you can't socialize now with your own friend group. You're going to need to go elsewhere. You're going to need to get different friends, obviously, because you can't go there. Be a teenager for a second and imagine how that feels. What do you mean I have to go get all new friends? What do you mean I can't I was socializing with them before. Now we're just doing it at a vacant apartment, right? That these other parents are not seeing any issue with us using. So this wasn't going well and the arguments were escalating with her daughter, and this mama could feel the level of disconnection building. Like the chasm was beginning to grow of disconnection, and her relationship with her 15-year-old daughter was starting to suffer. And this is what ends up happening. And you don't always notice it in the moment, but this is what ends up happening, and this is backed by science, okay? Is that the more that you are trying to keep your teenager safe, which is entirely a wonderful perspective that hell yeah. The more you are trying to keep your teenager safe, the more they feel controlled, then they don't feel like you trust them. Then they feel disrespected. And now you have a perfect recipe for defiance and lying and sneaking out and all the things. Okay? And you go back to, you can stand on your soapbox but I am responsible for keeping them safe. I did this conversation yesterday on TikTok, and I had this gorgeous mom of 5 boys come in and say, well, I just wouldn't let him go. I would not let him go. I'm like, oh, okay, I understand that. There's nothing wrong with that perspective. But in the long term, do you really think that's going to work? That you're just going to say to a 15-year-old teenager, nope, you can't go. You can't go. And they're going to continue to comply with that when that is the only friend group they have? You have to understand the social situation of this too. Teenagers' brains are highly susceptible to judgment, criticism, and comparison. They will do almost anything to avoid standing alone. Like they'll do almost anything to be in a group, even if it's a really bad group, because their brain feels safer than standing alone is social suicide for a teenager. Okay? That is also science. That is the science of why peer pressure works. Okay, so here's a quick story of mine similar to this. I grew up in a home that was very strict for good reason. Of course, it all comes back to, sure, my parents loved me. They wanted me to be safe. They were very, very strict on curfews, on what I could do, what I couldn't do. And I had a large penchant for freedom and somewhat adventure. So that didn't go really well. So here's what I used to do. I used to sit in my room, usually the night that I wanted to go do something that my parents had probably said no. I would sit in my room and I would evaluate. Was what I was going to do immoral? Was it going to be intentionally hurting anyone? Was it just plain stupid? Like, I don't know, smashing windows or something. Like, was it damaging any property that was illegal? The police were going to get called. I would actually sit and go through this in my mind the night before or the night of. And if I decided it met my criterion for just simply going out and having fun, but not, going beyond my moral or risk tolerance, then I would lie to my parents about what I was going to go do, and I would go do it anyway. And for the most part, 99% of the time, I was doing exactly what I thought I was going to do, and I was not doing what I felt was immoral, dangerous, illegal, hurting anyone, and just being with my friends and then coming back home. But I lied about it. Now, 96% of teenagers lie to their parents. That's studied, and I'm pretty sure the other 4 lied about not lying. So let's be honest for a sec. And remember that controlling situations, high compliance parenting or home situations have been proven to lead to sneaky, smart lying teenagers. So as much as I understand, your intention is to keep your teenager safe, and that is absolutely great. Trying to tell your teenager like carte blanche, that's it, you're not allowed to go, you can't go, will probably not go as far as what I'm about to introduce to you, okay? Because the key here is that connection, trust, and respect are the only tools to maintain a voice of influence in your teenager's life. Connection, trust, and respect are the only tools to maintain a voice of connection, a voice of influence in your teenager's life. So if your teenager feels like you don't trust them, or they're being defiant and either you feel disrespected or they don't feel heard, so they feel disrespected, you've lost connection and you've also lost influence. And that is the crappy part, because if you're like me, you were not raised understanding this, and because your intention is great, you're willing to get on that soapbox and make that the hill that you die on because you're supposed to keep your teenager safe, which it is good, but the methodology of creating that isn't working. For the most part, long term, it's not going to work. Might work on a one-time basis, but long term, it's not going to work. So let's go back to this mama and this 15-year-old girl who is now allowed to hang out at a vacant but furnished apartment with the other 15-year-old girlfriends every weekend, all weekend, because this other parent set owns this apartment and they let them use it. Now, before I go too much farther, let me just say this. If you and your partner were not home, like went on a date or were out for the night, and your teenager had their friends over to your house, isn't that kind of the same? Like, they're still unsupervised. Yes, it's your home and they know you're coming home, but they are still unsupervised in your home. So just before you go like all off the deep end that these 15-year-old girls are alone, unsupervised in this vacant apartment, it's not that different if you're not home and they're alone and unsupervised in your home. They can still do whatever they're going to do. So what I want to do is I want to give you the scripts that I gave this mama to flip this on its head a little bit, flip this around and go from being the enemy to the ally. Now, if you just said in your head, oh, great, we're raising snowflakes again, permissive, no boundaries, just let them free reign, do whatever they want. That might be what you're thinking. And if that's what you're thinking, you may have been raised like I was in a very strict and controlling home where authority was often a misuse of power, influence, and control. Okay? So if this feels like a mind bender for you, my Boundaries Boss program that is available right now via the link in my bio might be the place for you to start. All right, so protecting your teenager from bad influences is not about controlling who they are with and where they're going with those people. So saying to your teenager, you are not going there with those people, is an instant red flag to there's a different way to do this. There's a different way to probably get the same result where you are your teenager's ally, you maintain connection, respect, and trust, and a voice of influence, while you're still being a parent and trying to do the thing that you believe you're set out to do, which is keep your child safe, okay? So the long-term best way to protect your teenager is not through control. It's by equipping their developing brain with critical analysis, independent decision-making, risk analysis, okay? And they will not develop that, or it will take them longer. They will not develop that if you continue to control their environment rather than them having to be in an environment where there are risks and help your teenager sort through those thoughts to equip and empower them to make good choices on their own. Because whether you like it or not, you will not be with your teenager in every single moment to prevent these things from happening. And P.S., in case I need to say it, your teenager's not perfect. They're going to get it wrong. And those are learning opportunities where they desperately need to know that you love them even when they mess up, rather than holding them to some version of perfect, which I'm just going to say, I'm not, so maybe you're not. Like, we're not perfect. So, okay. The conversation that I gave to this mom with her 15-year-old daughter, here's exactly what I said to do. I said, I want you to sit down with your daughter. And the first thing, because they were already at a state where disconnection was really starting to be very divisive. So there was disrespect and she and her teenager were not feeling heard. So the first step was, because they were already there, which is very common, is I said, I want you to create a sit down with your teenager where you say to your teenager, first and foremost, I love you enough. I don't want to have this constant point of division between us. I know all of your friends are going to this vacant apartment and I know you want to be with them. And I totally understand why you would want to be with them. And I know, I have a different perspective on it. I want to hear you. I love you. I want to hear where you're at. And when you say that, then you open up I'd say conversation, but sometimes that insinuates you talking. Your teenager already knows how you feel about this. They feel like they're talked at and lectured pretty much most of their lives because they're told in this stage of their life where their brain is craving an adult level of independence, which yes, their brain isn't necessarily mature enough to manage, but that doesn't mean that you keep the baby gates around them until they're 18. They want to feel heard. They're constantly told they're not old enough, they're not smart enough, they're not tall enough, they're not responsible enough, they're blah, 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 not enough, okay? I want you to sit down with your teenager and I want you to zip it. Zip it. And say to your teenager, tell me where you're at with this. And then all you do in that conversation is active listening. No interrupting, no judging, no correcting, nothing. No finding the perfect moment to now start your lecture or finding the perfect moment to get back on your soapbox about trying to keep them safe. None. This is not your moment or your stage or your time. This is about your teenager. Because if you want to rebuild connection, it's going to start there using this. You're going to listen a whole heck of a lot more than you're going to talk in this one first critical stage because you're rebuilding that connection first and foremost. And you say to your teenager, tell me what you think about this. And they're probably going to be like, well, if you're being so, and you're like making up, and let them have it. So long as there is basic respect and there's no name calling and everything else, let them have it. And all you say is, yeah, I get that. What else? How else do you feel? And you just, that's it. Just basic, you're taking the ball of yarn and you're just helping it to unfold while you listen. What else? What do you wish I would say? What do you wish would be what are you wishing would happen right now? And you just keep listening. What do you wish I would say? How do you wish you felt about this situation? How do you want to feel about this situation? That's all you're doing. This is all about them, and you're giving them the time. And it might take more than one conversation. If this has gotten so heated that it's difficult to feel heard, but all you do is when they're finished talking is, or help me to understand. Help me to understand. It doesn't mean you agree. Just saying, you are not in this to agree, my friends. You're just in this to listen, which is a good part of validating and empathizing. Yeah, I get you want to be with your friends. I bet it would be really fun. And how cool to like be in your own apartment without like supervision. I mean, come on, that's cool. It's fun. You've got to validate their need for independence. You're not validating what they're doing with it, but you got to validate their need for independence, okay? So do a whole lot of listening. And if it takes more than one conversation, then when that one's finished or they don't want to say anymore, you're like, thanks for sharing that. That's all you say. Thank you for sharing that with me. I feel like I understand you better. And I want to keep listening. And then you leave. And then you do it again whenever it feels right the next time. Maybe you're driving them to a sport a couple days later and your, windshield time is really good because you're not staring at them. And kids love that in a car because it feels safer. So you could say something like, I really appreciated what you shared with me the other day. I've thought about it. And I'm really curious. Is there anything else you want to share with me about that? And then they might have something more. They might be like, yeah, my friends were talking today at school about all the fun they had last weekend at that apartment and I wasn't there. And I felt left out and I'm mad and I think you're being such a biatch and like whatever, right? And just like, yeah, that must have been really hard. That must be really hard for you to hear about what your friends are doing and you missed out on that. I'm sorry that you feel left out. Not I'm sorry I made the choice, but I'm sorry you felt left out. Remember in the teenage brain, standing alone, not having a pack is social suicide. And asking your teenager to literally just go find a whole new friend group is like unreasonable. So that's the first step. Do a whole lot of listening and empathizing. If you're not sure what that looks or sounds like, you can message me on Instagram at Ali Payne. I have other full YouTube videos on what it sounds like to empathize and validate and listen. Okay, then you go to this, and this is what I said to this mama with her 15-year-old daughter. Then I said, you start to talk about what kinds of things are fun there. What is fun about being in that place with your friends? What do you like about it? What is fun about it? How does that feel? This is about going from enemy to ally, okay? Then you go to what kind of things would feel unsafe? Like what kind of things would be happening that wouldn't feel safe for you to be there with your friends. And if your teenager says, well, I don't know, which is a common answer as a teenager, so that's okay. You can say, okay, let's talk about drinking. Not, well, you're not going to drink. Get off your soapbox. That is not building connection. That is passing judgment. And say to her, okay, or your son, so let's say your friends decided to drink. Would that feel safe for you? And maybe your teenager would say, well, yeah, like, I guess like if they're just having a couple drinks, sure, whatever. And then you could say, okay, what would you feel pressured to drink with them? Not the judgment FBI thing of, oh, well, are you going to drink too? Are you? No, that's not building connection. Stay curious. You are helping your teenager's brain to develop independent decision-making and critical analysis, okay? So you say to your teenager, would you feel pressured to drink with them? Now, maybe your teenager's like, well, I don't know. Like, probably not. Maybe, I don't know. They might not know the answer to that. That doesn't matter. The question is helping them to build their own framework of what is a healthy choice for them and what's not. You are also starting to understand their values and beliefs, which, by the way, you cannot punish, discipline, or consequence your values and beliefs into your teenager's brain. Also scientifically proven. So if you're expecting this teenager, this spawn of yours in front of you, to have the same values and beliefs as you, that's going to be a conversation ender. Or expecting that is also going to create wild division and disconnection. And that's not what we're aiming for. The whole point of this conversation here is about building more trust and respect and connection, because that's the only way to maintain a voice of influence in your teenager's life. Now, in this conversation this mama had with her 15-year-old daughter, so what about drinking? And so we talked about that. And then she talked about, what about if they were to start doing drugs? Like what if they were smoking some Mary J? Or what if, now picture this for a second. This is 15-year-old girls hanging out in a vacant apartment. Let's say the girls don't want their parents to know, so they go out on the balcony. How often does that happen? Someone's out on their balcony smoking the Mary J. The apartment next door smells the smell and comes out onto the balcony and is like, 15-year-old girl smoking Mary J. I'm calling the police. Now, the way that you introduce this to your teenager is, okay, again, what if your friends started having edibles or doing drugs or whatever? How would you feel in that situation? Or see, again, you're helping your teenager build a set of evaluation, of critical analysis to evaluate the risk of the situation. Then you might say, if you go out, I'm just saying to you, I just want you to know, if you go out on the balcony to smoke that and a neighbor might smell it and notice you girls out there, there is a possibility, do not lecture, there's a possibility they might call the police. Even if at that moment you were not partaking in the drugs, if the police show up at the door in a room of 15-year-old girls that are in illegal possession of that drug, you will be wiped with the same brush. Unless you're very obviously not participating, and only after the police do their further investigation, you might not get brushed with that same brush. So that there is a risk there. So your teenager, you're not telling your teenager what to do. You're saying, this is a possible risk. And they could be like, oh, never thought about that. Okay. And you don't have to ask them, so what would you do? This is all about this is a garden. This is a garden. You're planting seeds. You're just planting seeds. Okay. They're the gardener. You're just planting the seeds. And you're helping them through this evaluation process. And then you can say things like, okay, what if your friends invited some boys over? Or if this is teenage boys, what if, or whatever they identify as, what if they invited some girls over? Would that still feel comfortable or safe? And in this case, this mom and this 15-year-old girl, it was like, well, it depends on who the boys are. Okay, good point. Which boys would you mark as safe, and which boys, like, and it was like, well, mom, like any boys that I don't know. Okay, so if that feels unsafe, remember that a situation that in one moment can feel safe, if you add alcohol or drugs to it, may quickly feel unsafe, even though those were people who previously you would have said you feel safe with. Okay, so when it comes down to it, here was the outcome of this conversation. The mama was building trust, respect, and connection with her daughter. This happened over a few weekends. The moment that the mom heard her daughter and the experience, the fun and freedom and, connection with her friends that she was trying to create, she went from being enemy, purely trying to keep her daughter safe, but doing it out of control and fear, to ally, because she was helping her daughter develop her own set of internal evaluation criterion of risk, without imposing her own stuff on it. The final outcome was this: help your daughter create an emergency plan and be part of it. Now you're an ally, equipping your teenager in sketchy situations. So she and her daughter and the dad created an agreement where her daughter had like some set emojis. If I text you this, so it was an agreement. This text is the 911, where they said, if you text us this, we will immediately call you and pretend, like make up some fake excuse about why we have to come get you, because we don't care if your friends think that we are being super controlling and nasty and mean, and you can go ahead and throw us under the bus, because we're not invested in them liking us. We're invested in your safety and your well-being. So if you text us this, we will immediately phone you and make up some false reason why we have to immediately come and pick you up. And you can blame it on us. You can say, oh my gosh, my parents are freaking out. They've just, I have to go. And your friends will be like, oh, like, but we're just starting to have fun. I know my mom's like being like whatever, I have to go. Whatever excuse is required, use me as an excuse. Don't care. Get out. And that gives your teenager a safe out where they get out of the dangerous situation that you helped them build a set of evaluation criterion for. Now they feel respected and trusted. They call you in an emergency situation. You go pick them up, and you can affirm the heck out of them and say how much you trust them, how much you respect how hard that might have been to make that decision. Don't forget, peer pressure in the teenage brain is wild. Their need to be accepted and included, even in very dangerous situations, is high. And you say to your teenager, I am so proud of you for using our emergency plan. And don't dig for what was happening. You say to them, I trust you. And of course, at that point, there is zero consequences, zero punishment, because your teenager did what you talked about. You go through the drive-thru at McDonald's or whatever, and you guys go have a milkshake and you sit and talk about it because you are so proud of them for the choice that they made. And don't press. If they don't want to talk about what was happening there, that's not the point. The point is they did what you agreed on. And you can say to them, hey, look, it's fine if you don't want to talk about it. You can still go through the drive-thru and acknowledge them. If you want to share, I'm ready to listen. Again, I'm really proud of you for taking that step. I'm sure that was difficult for you. That's all. Then you can slowly start, you have built so much trust, respect, and connection in that moment it is likely they will come and tell you. And I hear this from parents. I'm not making this up. I hear this from parents every single day, that when they do these steps that I'm telling you right now, that I went through with this mama the other day and her 15-year-old daughter, that teenager almost always comes back in the door and ends up saying, yeah, you know what? I decided to leave. They were doing some of this stuff and I didn't like it. And I know in your head, you're like, freak out. Yeah, I need to like come back, be my baby, lock you in your room, be safe. I know. You can't. And that's when you have to keep the conversation open with your teen. Tell me more. What did you feel? What were you, what were some of your thoughts? What were you worried about? At what point, like what was the point where it flipped from fun to dangerous for you? You're continuing to help your teenager's growing brain develop a more complex scaffolding around risk analysis, critical thinking, and decision making as their ally, rather than being the enemy who's trying to control, also desperately trying to keep your teenager safe, but disabling their brain from going through this process. Does it mean they're going to be perfect? No, it doesn't. Does it mean you might still have to go down to the cop shop and get your 15-year-old who was choosing not to participate in smoking the Mary J, but they still got caught? And is that a consequence or I don't know. I actually think it's a conversation first. Because they'll be like, Mom, I wasn't doing it. They were out on the balcony. I was not doing it. You can be like, great. Okay, let's talk about it. How did that feel? How are you feeling about it? What did you think? What was the point where you thought that was going to be okay, that then it wasn't? What would you do differently next time? I'm not saying let your kids get away with everything and do free reign. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. But if your first question to me right here, right now was, yeah, but what's the consequence, Allie? What's the consequence? Then that's more reason why I need you to be here. And my Become a Boundaries Boss program with my new compassionate consequence formula is exactly for you. It's for you. And you can get it by hitting my name and then the link in my bio. It's right there. Because when you are willing to get curious first, you will connect. Then you have a conversation, a compassionate one, not expecting perfection, because unless you're perfect, you have no right to ask your teenager to be perfect. Because while their brain is developing this critical analysis, independent decision-making, risk tolerance, all of those things, they're going to get it wrong. But what's more important is that you maintain connection, respect in the process, even if trust feels broken. Even when trust feels broken, you maintain respect and connection because it's the only way to have a voice of influence in your teenager's life. So you can either do it by trying to control them, which long term, again, builds lying, sneaky kids. I was one of them. I already told you my story. I used to sneak out all the time. I used to wait till my parents went to bed, and then I'd take the screen off my window, and there was like a cold room roof under my window, and I'd jump out my window and I'd leave. I'd lie and sneak out all the time. But I would only do things that I viewed as morally good. They were legal, not illegal. I was not hurting or damaging any property, and I viewed very low risk. But because my parents were unwilling to be in that conversation with me, I just snuck out and did it anyway. This isn't about whether your teenager is lying to you or not. If you are trying to be the FBI agent and be like, and who was there? And what were they doing? And what did they say? And then what did you do? And what time was that? If you're trying to be the FBI agent, trying to determine if your teenager's lying or not, you're on the wrong path. You are on a fruitless path. Not a fruitful path. It doesn't matter if your teenager's lying to you or not. What matters is that you maintain open connection of dialogue with your teenager to help them develop this in their brain, because when you do that, you are far more likely to hear the truth. even if the truth is very uncomfortable for you. And you do decide to set a boundary and a consequence. You pick, would you rather your teenager be honest with you so that you can have dialogue and curious conversation that even when you put in consequences, builds connection, respect, and trust, or controlling that tanks it all? And if you don't have influence in your teenager's life, that's a tough and scary place to be. Probably scarier than finding out the truth because they were willing to come and tell you, or being their ally in creating critical emergency plans, emergency get out fast plans. That's going to keep them safer in the long run. Now, if you have a group of teenagers, I also recommend, as one last caveat, help your teenagers' friend group develop their own emergency out plan. And I know this is one of the best things. So if you have a group of guys, what's their emergency out plan that they can text each other if they feel like things are going down a path at a larger party or gathering that they don't want to be at and it's not going well, like, or there's a fight coming out or whatever? What's their emergency plan amongst them? Same with girls. Unfortunately, it is a little bit different for girls. For instance, when you're out, right, you always have your hand over the top of your drink. If you have to go to the bathroom, you give one of your girlfriends that drink. And if she's not someone who's going to guarantee they're going to have the hand over the drink, then you take the drink with you to the bathroom. Or if you set that drink down and you turn your head for even 1 second, you don't drink that drink. You go get another drink. These are things, building the emergency plan. It's this whole teach a man to fish thing, right? You can give a man a fish and you'll feed him for one night. You can try and lock your teenager up and keep them from bad influences, but that's only going to do a one-off situation. Teach a man to fish and he'll be fed for life. If you help your teenager develop this lens of risk analysis, independent decision-making, and critical analysis, you are equipping and empowering them to be as safe as possible, to make as best of choice as possible, which may not be the choices you would make, but it's the best choice as possible, as their ally. So you might actually have a relationship when this is over. I hope that has been helpful for you. I know you're just getting anxious at the idea of this. Absolutely, absolutely. And sorry, there was one more comment. I'm just going back here. What would you do? You cannot force your teenager to go to therapy. Yeah, so that's a different conversation, but you cannot force. Okay, I want to thank you again for watching here on Instagram. Hit the follow, and if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. Please share this with any parent who you know is struggling with this exact issue. And if you want these answers like this, go to the link in my bio and get the Become a Boundaries Boss course right now. It's lifetime access, online self-paced, guaranteed for the first 30 days after your purchase. It has everything I just talked about in there so that you maintain and build trust and connection, as well as a voice of influence in your teen, which will keep them safe longer over time. If you have any questions, message me at Allie Payne on Instagram, at Allie Payne on TikTok. It's harder to message me, or on my website, alliepayne.com. Thanks everybody for joining me. I will not be here next Thursday, but I am going to be here on Wednesday instead. I'm actually attempting to go on a vacay. So February 24th and the following Thursday, whatever that is, I will not be here, but I have not disappeared for good. I promise. Just give me a couple weeks off and I will be back full steam in March. So thanks everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye.